We're live. Do awesome shit.
That's right.
That's how we kick it off.
Right here.
Yeah, you guys are passing through Livingston, or my living room, and you guys have been on. Is it 3 weeks, 4 weeks, almost a month?
We left 3 weeks ago. Tomorrow.
Today, Saturday.
No,
Wait, today's Friday.
You are nervous.
So I think it's interesting. I think a good place to start would be you guys are both entrepreneurs. And I think a lot of times I've certainly been in this place where you feel like you don't have access to that kind of flexibility, even though like technically on paper, right? Like that's what everybody says. So like I'm gonna start my own business so I have free time or I can do my own schedule. And then you end up just working more than everybody who's ever had just like a regular job. And you guys certainly, I'm sure, done that before, like to start your business, but you also like can travel around the country or out in the West, even to the West Coast. Now you're in Montana. What's that been like? Like, how have you balanced it? How did you relinquish some of that, like, I imagine some of that like pressure to be like, oh, if I'm not here, like I'm gonna go backwards. Like my business isn't gonna grow. So what's that been like for you guys?
I feel like I was definitely more nervous than Jacob was. So being an acupuncturist, I'm much more of like the in-person in order to like get paid, whereas you kind of have a little more flexibility with the online side of things. But when we actually started dating, one of our stipulations was that Jacob wanted to take a month sabbatical every year.
It was like the first day combo. That's the first thing we covered.
Non-negotiables, 1 month sabbatical. So I kind of like knew that going into this. And I feel like you helped like definitely get me to like take the time to leave and to be like, it's going to be okay. Your patients are not going to leave you after, 3 to 4 weeks. And like, I think like stepping away gives you so much more perspective than like just being in the grind 24/7. And I feel like as entrepreneurs and like, I think all three of us, like it is easy to just do that every single day. But like, I think one of my biggest takeaways is again, just like how important travel is, and it's grown our relationship. We're coming back with like so many more business ideas, like together, solo, and stuff that we wouldn't have gotten, like had we just stayed in Minnesota and just stayed in our routine. It's like being an entrepreneur is like coming up with ideas and constantly like pivoting and trying things. And like, what better way to do that than travel?
Yeah. I think the pattern interrupt is something I've talked about a lot, but I think people, you don't recognize, at least I always am reminded like how valuable it is when I force myself to do it. It's easy to say like, you gotta get out of your space and you gotta like break your routine and get out of your fine, and you wake up tomorrow and you like do the same shit over again. And then when you don't do that and you like do something else, like to your point, it's like you get so many good ideas. Like it's just amazing like how productive that time is. You're like more online. Like how is that? And because I know you've been like you took some calls earlier, you've been able to like massage that a little bit, but like what's that pattern interrupt for you?
Yeah, well, I didn't do any of my in-person. Actually, that's not true. I did a few training sessions and I think about it, but for the most part, I didn't do any of my like in-person, obviously group classes or strength training. And this sabbatical, I was a little bit more intentional, even with like my run coaching clients, where there was a few where they were new clients and I felt like it was important to like touch base with them. But I had a few where I was like, let's not talk for the month. And like last year, even I wouldn't have had the confidence to do that. I would have been worried about like, what if they find me a coach?
Yeah.
And that's been something that's changed a lot, even because part of the reason that I like to do these sabbaticals, as I call them, is because one, I do think it helps with burnout, but two, I think it helps more importantly, like Kailee was saying, kind of getting out of the day-to-day grind. Because otherwise, like 3 months go by and you're like, oh shit, I haven't even this business objective or this, right? So even though we didn't even like have much time to sit down and necessarily like write down like goals, visions, missions, whatever. Being together and having a lot of time to, even if it was like at a brewery, like drinking beer and playing games, and just all of a sudden like bulb goes off, that you just have more brain time to think about stuff. And I think that that's like the biggest reason we like to go places, is because it kind of like, it forces us to take a step back and not think about the environment that we're in within the environment, but be able to kind of analyze what's going on outside of it and just think bigger, honestly, too. Like when we came through here that first week, you know, we have a conversation with you who is not in Minnesota, right? So you're very much not within that circle that we're seeing things through. So your viewpoint on like any issues or any ideas is just so much different than either of us or anyone in Minnesota has, right? And then talking to like a couple of Kailee's friends about different things, and you just get, there's just so much different viewpoints from other people that you meet. There's viewpoints from yourself that you get and change. And I think, the deep work is the biggest thing. But I was able to work a little bit online, and it was kind of more of a cash flow thing, to be honest. It was like, this will be nice that we have the flexibility to still work a little bit, so that I, still could be making some money while we were traveling, because something that's not sexy about, we just took off 3 weeks is like, oh shit, we just took off 3 weeks. That's, no income.
We don't get PTO.
Right.
We don't have sick time.
Yeah.
Nothing. And like, not only that, but we're spending more money, right?
Sure.
In those 3 weeks.
Yeah. I'm curious you guys' thoughts. Like I struggled a lot. I continue, I've gotten better, but I had struggled a lot with like to start, it was just like taking time away. Like I didn't take a day off for like a decade. And I like mean that, and I'm not trying to sound like, that's not me bragging. Like I just didn't know how to, every day I worked. I worked every vacation. I just plowed through. I was like, okay, that doesn't work.
There's always something to do.
There's always something to do. And it felt like I was like going to get behind. And I just didn't have, so like good on you guys. I just didn't have the tools or the perspective to like understand how to navigate that early on. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to back off of that. And then I think I went, maybe for me, like I went a little too hard in the other direction, where I just did these like big chunks of time totally like cut off. And that actually didn't feel that productive, because when I came back, I felt really disconnected from my work, which I really enjoy. So now I find like I've kind of, in the last maybe like 5 years or something, come to this more just like fluid idea about work in general, and just like how it integrates into my life. And that like, if I need to take a day fully away, like fine. But if I like want to work, or if I'm on like vacation, but I'm in another place, and like, that doesn't define how I think about work. I think that's like place is less of like an indicator of like how I engage with work, and more about how I'm feeling about work, and like making sure it's a value add and not doing it from a place of like forcing it. And that's really helped me, like, because I do want to be engaged. And so I found it just like hard stops of just like 3 weeks totally away, like actually made me feel more anxious, just from a place of like, I felt like I had some good ideas, but then I was like trying to shut that down, because I was like, don't think about work. This is your time away. I was like, well, that doesn't feel good. Like back to the pattern interrupt thing. Like it does. So now I try to just like let it flow. And I'm like, if I wake up and I'm on quote unquote vacation like I was just in Greece, like I woke up like fired up, and I just worked like half a day because I wanted to, and like technically I was on vacation and off, but and so I had several days like that where I just like, or like at night before I went to bed, just like writing stuff down and like planning and doing. So I don't know. It feels like you guys are like already there. It took me a long time to get there. I'm talking like a, I don't know, 15 plus year timeline. You guys are way ahead of the curve, or my curve.
But we have people to learn from like you. And like this morning you were saying like life is for living. I feel like that's why we get along so well too, because we're very much like, let's live in the moment. Like we have the ability to take the time right now. like we can just go for a run or we can go, do whatever it is that we want to do. It's like, why should we have to wait? And I feel like that's like also the benefit of being an entrepreneur. Like, yes, you can grind 24/7, but like we do have more the ability to like do things now.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to change things like every day. We can make our own decisions and like completely change our business, like just because we want to.
Yeah.
And I think the other like reason why I was more okay with like traveling and stuff is like I'm very big on like walking the talk, and like with my patients, like I'm very big on like you need to take time to rest, you need to break. And like we are talking about last night too, is like it's okay to like not exercise every single day, because like the people we work with are very active and constantly doing things. And it's like I want my patients to see like it's okay to like vacation, it's okay to like do this stuff. And like I think all of us can like speak to that too. Like our like clients, patients like hearing about these things too. Like it's what draws them to us.
Totally. Yeah, I think you have to be like your own. I mean, you definitely have to practice what you preach, I think, or try, but then like be your own like test case too. Like I try to really think about like my process and what works, and it's not going to work for everybody, but like when inevitably people are like, hey, like I'd like some guidance, or like what's worked for you. Like I want to be able to just at least like definitively say for me is like, don't try this. Like this is, like this is what's worked for me. Or I think like, I don't know, I think it's like a cultural thing too. We now, because like working all the time is such like a badge of honor that people, right? Like that now people are like embarrassed to say they took time away. Yeah. Right. And then they're like, I mean, I was just talking, this happens all the time. Like I talk to people and they're like, they were on like a trip, they went on vacation. Is what they won't call it that, right? They're like, oh, I'm like, I'm working remote, or I'm like, I'm in a different place. I'm like, you're on vacation, that's fine, you can do that. And they're like, oh, I'm with my family off site. I'm like, are we just gonna call it all different things except for like it's okay? And they're like, how's your vacation? And then they just like skirt around it. They're like, oh, fine, but good, glad to be back. Like that. I'm like, are you? Like it doesn't feel like you're glad to be back, and it didn't really feel like you were glad to be there. Like like it's like we were talking last night, and just like there is a being present is like a muscle to be worked, right? And to like recognize that that like every opportunity, like every experience, like has an important role, and that they don't all have to be like they don't, I don't know. They don't have to be the same, or they don't have to be like weighted equally, or they don't have to like the way that you define like the role of those experiences can and should be different. Meaning like, what is like success for a vacation is different than like what is success on like a super productive work day, right? And like defining that success differently, I think is something that people like shortchange themselves, right? They're like, oh, it wasn't, because I didn't make progress, that means I went backward. Yeah. I'm like, no, like things still can move forward, just in different ways. There's like expectation alignment.
Right. And on the one hand, I'm like, I want to create a life that I don't like want vacation from, but on the other hand, it's like, why is that bad to want vacation?
Right.
Yeah,
it's interesting. I know I've thought about, again, this is something I'm always like jockeying with, because I do think it's like it's person specific too. Like I do know like rest looks different for different people, right? And
we've discovered
that, like right? Some people rest is sitting on the couch and like watching Netflix for a day. Is that here? Yeah. And like some people, like me, that's not it. Like that makes me feel worse. Now, like I might like
we have this conversation.
Yeah. So I think like being aware of that and knowing that like, so like to like the time away and pattern interrupts, like some level of engagement for me still feels very restful than like nothing at all. Like that can create like more anxiety. It's not from a place of like lack or like shame, but it's just truly like the way my brain works. Like it doesn't, I can't like powering down just doesn't feel like a good thing for me unless I'm like sick. And even then, honestly, like like a walk still feels better than like a couch day. You guys have talked about that. It feels
Right. Like I'm on this trip, we've discovered it. Like I go away and I want to hit it hard and run like a lot and work out a lot. And then I want to hit it super easy. It's like I'm up here and then I'm down here.
Uh-huh.
You know, I'm running 10 miles in the morning, lifting at lunch. And then at nighttime, I'm eating Ben & Jerry's and watching Better Call Saul. Like that.
You're
that's
very much
like,
of the extreme.
right. I'm like
with everything in life.
Right. It's like the rabbit versus salamander. You know, it's like or bunny versus salamander, whatever it is. But I'm the spectrums. I'm very extreme, one or the other. And that's more than just what we're talking right now. It's like when I'm running, I'm fucking running, right? Like I'm into running. And when I'm lifting, like I'm into lifting. Like it's very hard for me to not be all in. And if I'm not running, I'm not running. Like I'm zero, right?
Huh.
And same with work. So, you know, when I'm working on like,
Uh-huh.
and then when I'm not working, I'm chilling, you know? And we're very different. We've learned we're very different in that.
I think like recognizing that is really important, like for everyone, right? I think that there's like a level of introspection that we don't give ourselves the opportunity to sort that out, right? Because that also gets ascribed like on us and for us, right? Or just like I guess like relaxing looks like this.
This is what I have to
and
do.
I guess working
Right.
looks like this, and not like pick a thing, right? Like recovery, or like you look at it through like the lens of, you know, being an athlete, like what is recovery, right? Like is it like laying in bed taking a nap, or is it something else, right? Like active, you know. I think everybody, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to make that look a certain way based on like what we imagine it's supposed to look like. So just knowing that about yourself. Like Kailee used to like she was just like, can't you just sit still? Like we would like, you know, do like a snowy winter day and it'd be freezing cold outside, and you know, we've been busy all week and traveling, and I'd come back, it'd be like Saturday or Sunday, and she'd like, just a nice day to relax. And I'd make it like 30 minutes on this couch. And I'd be like, I'm going to go like organize the garage. Like I can't, like this doesn't feel good for me and my brain. Or I'd work or something, right? Like I'd write on the whiteboard, like I'd plan, but that felt like that was my version of rest, right? It's not full gas. I'm not like taking meetings. I'm not like, it's a different, like divergent way, but like engagement just still feels like rest. And it's like another task a lot of times. I am pretty specific about like typically like I don't work on Sundays. And that is like having to do with me being religious. Like that's just Sunday. I typically do work on Saturdays because I can't get it all done Monday through Friday. And so typically I wake up Saturday with like a lot on my mind. So I just work on Saturdays, at least like part of the day. And Sunday I'm like, I'm just going to like be engaged, but in something else. Right. So like, you know, if I need to like do a house project or I need to like build whatever, like, you know, still engaged, but somewhere else. And I think just like recognizing that. And when I do that, Kaylee's like, she's in here like watching TV, like watching Great British Baking Show. And she's pumped, right? Like she's like best day. And I'm just like out, you know, like I'm like running errands and doing things. And like we both like come back and I'm like, oh man, what a great day. She's like, yeah, me too. She's like, I walked one step today. And I'm like, I got in like about 15 miles, like up and down around the yard. Like, you know, I got my to-do list that I mapped out, and like, I feel great. Yeah, I know, it's interesting.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Mm-mm. Like my early kind of few years starting to dive into like podcasts and personal development and all this stuff. I was like trying to like match other people and figure out what is the ideal way to work, to train, to whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think it really just boils down to what's the ideal way for you, right? And then like we can learn that for our clients.
Totally.
Too, right? It's like, and we'll help them learn it / whatever. Because just because Kailee likes to do something and recover one way doesn't mean that I have to do that. And that's been a like relationship epiphany too for us that we've talked a lot about as well, because it's like, I'm not as productive if I'm not like typically full gas and then full not, right? And then like for me, my Sunday is like funny enough, when we first started dating, that was a big friction point for us where we had a lot of little arguments about it, because on my Sundays before pre-Kaylee, it was lay on the couch, right? And then Kaylee, her way to, kind of unwind is she wants to go spend time with family, friends, whatever on Sunday that she doesn't get to see during the week. Cleaning, different things, right? Yeah. And I'm like, I'll do that during the week. Yeah. Sunday's like, it's my rest time, right? It's, again, it's like, I want to get up, I want to do a long run, and I want to just have Jacob time. Yeah. Right? And so then we went through periods too, where it was like, we try to match each other, and like, that doesn't work. So that's like resentment and different stuff. Right. And I think it just boils down to figuring out what works best for you.
Yeah, I want to double down on that. I think, like, for anyone listening, I mean, I think this is like one of the biggest things. I'd be interested to like hear you guys' take on this as people like in this space who are supporting people like through the lens of like, sport and athleticism, or, business and entrepreneurship. Like, figure out what works, right? There's so many like talking heads on the internet. And I find I spend a lot of time trying to just help people understand how to understand what works for them. Because they're like, oh, such and such said do this. I should do, like, to your point, like, spend a lot of time like taking in the clips from podcasts that you read or little thing. And that's good. Like, consume information. Like, I'm a lifelong learner, but just use it to inform like your approach, right? Like, Andrew Huberman told me to do, and they kill themselves to go like get up at 3 a.m. to put their toes in the grass and stare at the sun. Like, Peter Attia told me to do that, eat. I'm like, okay, like, let's just take snippets and let's understand what works and let's understand the science. And then what works for you, right? And if, like, we talked about this last night, like, if it's not a value add, it's not valuable, right? Like, just shut it down. I say, like, I think about everything on like a spectrum of life. So if you can't do it from now until you die, then don't do it, right? Meaning, like, if you can't do it consistently and it doesn't add value, like, don't do it. Don't be boom and bust, right? Like, don't do it for 6 months, because then, like, it doesn't add up to anything, right? And that's always like consistency over intensity, right? Like, I would rather just someone do it consistently forever than to do it for, like, as hard as they can fucking go for 3 months and then realize that doesn't actually do anything for them. They can't sustain it. And so, yeah, just like, I want people to like know what works for you, right? There's no one best diet. There's no one best training program. There's no one. It's aggregate pieces and parts of all of these things. And then figure out what works. Listen to your body. Listen to your inner voice. Listen to your, whatever that is. Do you guys, do people like in your space, do they bring a lot? I mean, there's so much shit out there. Think about every topic, I'm sure, if you're looking for it, but like, do you combat that? Or like, yeah, what's your experience with that?
You should say your space too.
Say what?
You should say your space that you work in.
Oh, yes, I am an acupuncturist and work with endurance athletes specifically. Mm-hmm. And like, I'm 100% about like sustainable and lifelong things. Like, that's always like the thing that I try to like talk about and nail the head with my patients. And like diet, for example, like huge into nutrition. And I'm always like focusing on like whole foods and like things that like, will be around for forever. Right. Instead of like hitting that diet where it's like, only red meat or only fruits or only something. It's like, maybe there's a period where you can, do a reset or something of that, but like always incorporating like all of the things. I'm just big on more of like organic whole foods, for example. And for working out, for example, like I believe there's seasons. Like when I was training for my 200, like I was going at it harder and I knew that wasn't something I'd be able to do for my entire life. But like typically my whole standpoint is, can I like do this activity for forever and not getting burned out on it? And it's like this morning, I didn't feel like running, but I wanted to walk because I do believe like movement is very important. And today my walk was good, and then we're going to lift later, and that's fine. But instead of being like, I need to run every single day, it's like, yeah, are you going to do that every single day for the rest of your life? Maybe, but probably not. And being able to adapt to that. And I think that's the huge thing, is like being able to be flexible with what you're doing and to think of more of that long-term goal.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd say I'm more of like the balance person, like between the two of us too.
I've heard it described. I don't remember who said this or where I heard it, but flexible rigidity, right? Which is this strong adherence to an overarching goal, but being flexible en route to that thing, right? And knowing that like there's ebbs and flows, and that there's there's seasons, and also it's a great example. Like, absolutely, like there are seasons of intensity. Like if you want to do something hard, like you got to hit it hard. But I think also, and you said this, like being able to see past that thing and know that that's a benchmark, but it's also not going to derail you from your like end game, which is longevity and sustainability.
Right.
I think specifically with like endurance sports, a lot of people, and this is like one of my like biggest, I guess, hopes and goals with like the influence that I can have in this space, is like to allow people to use an event or a specific goal as a benchmark and not an endpoint. Because a lot of people are like, I'm going to do a marathon, and they just crush themselves unless the last time they run, because they're so over it by the time right. And to me, that really diminishes the goal of the marathon, which is not about fitness at all, right? And not about finishing the marathon, but about learning the process and learning your body and then to leverage that to be more effective on the other side of that, right? To be a better runner, a more sustainable runner, to enjoy running more. And you could insert any event, like I'm sure you've all seen it, like happen on everything. Like, nope, never touching my running shoes, bike, insert like right, like I'm over it. And so there's this need for like just recognizing that thing, and then to forecast out like, is it sustainable? Like on the other side of that, am I still gonna give a shit about it? Because that's really the goal. Right? Like, I call it consistent movement practice. Just consistently move in ways that are in alignment with your goals all the time. Right? And some days that's a walk, some days a run, and sometimes it's a lot of volume, and sometimes it's a lot of intensity, and then like up and down, and then we die. It's over. Right? Like you do that forever. Hopefully. Like that's my goal.
Sorry, just like those overarching themes, like always going to have movement in my life. Nutrition is always going to be there. Like mindset, mindfulness, like, and how we like integrate that is going to change. Mm-hmm. But like having, like, I know those are always going to be like foundational things in my life. So yes, figuring out how can we do this for forever.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, the eyes are on me. Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And
you can push back.
No, I mean, it kind of stems back to like what we were just talking about like the way I rest and the way I work versus you two. And it's something that I battle a lot in my head. I'm like, again, like what's the right way? What's the right way for me? Right. And so forth. Cause like on the one hand, I'm like, I'm not that person, nor am I that coach who goes all in on a marathon and then doesn't run for a year. I mean, I did that like in college, my very first marathon, but for the most part, like I'm ready to get after it again. Right. So on the one hand, I hear you on that. But then like when it comes to like nutrition, for example, for me, if like ice cream, right, it's very hard for me to balance ice cream into my diet. If I'm balancing ice cream into my diet, that turns into like legit a jug of ice cream every night, right? There is no balance. It's like zero or nothing, right? And do I coach that way? Do I say like, oh, no ice cream for you ever, right? No, I wouldn't ever do that. It's like figuring out what works for you. I was on a call with one of my clients this morning, and he is a little similar to me in the sense where it's like he wants to just hit it hard for 3 months and like lock in, right? And then reassess, chill, and then, maybe move forward from there. And it's not that like, I don't look at it as a longevity thing, because I do, right? I think I just look at it slightly different, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that that also partly goes into like addiction mindset too, a little bit. And I don't know, that's a whole topic.
Oh, we're getting into exercise addiction.
We could
right
dive
now?
into, right? Because it's like,
Food.
but I get addicted to like one. Addiction is trauma, right? So I'm all on board with that.
Mhm.
You know, we get addicted to things to like get over trauma or like avoid trauma, right? And you can be addicted to exercise just like food, whatever, right? And like for me, it's very easy for me to get addicted to anything. That could be alcohol, weed, I'm sure hard drugs. I've never done any hard drugs, but like I'm sure, you know, anything, right? I just use, because I'm very aware of it, I use my addictive personality to deal with things, and I channel it into exercise typically. And sometimes that will go into food too, but a lot of times with food, it ends up being addictive, like binge eating habits, right? Or, you know, again, we talked about all or nothing. I've done like the binge eating side of things, and I've done the I'm not eating anything side of things too, right? Or like the periods where it's like, I'm not going to eat ice cream for months, right? And I won't eat ice cream for months, right? And I'll just cut it completely out, right? And I think a lot of that's just like me figuring things out still as well, because like on this trip, like with alcohol, I think the most I've had in one night is maybe 3 drinks. And that's new for me. Like that has actually been like a huge win, in my opinion, of being able to like kind of take a step back and look around and be like, okay, I don't have to start taking shots of 10 margaritas, right? So I think there might also be like a growth opportunity there that I just am continuing like working towards too.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, do you believe that it's like very like dependent on the person then, or do you feel like you can grow into more like balance?
I think it's dependent on the person, because like you take like the alcoholic, for example, that's never drinking alcohol again, right? And like that's okay because we look at alcohol as a negative, right? But if you channeled that into like exercise or food, like food, right? If I was like, I'm never eating ice cream again, then I have a problem, right? Or like, I'm trying to think of like a good way to like analyze with the exercise side of things, but you get what I'm kind of saying? Like,
I mean, it comes back. I think we're circling around a little bit. I wonder if it's related to like what we were talking about last night, or it's like the guilt associated with,
right.
like for me, I definitely had struggled with exercise addiction. I absolutely know for like a really large chunk of my life that was a substitute for, that was a coping mechanism for lots of stuff that I was running away from. And I very much subscribed to like, all you have to be is faster than your demons, right? And it was just like darkness. And that's not a good place. And I'm on the other side of that. And that's not how I see exercise in my life now. But that guilt that comes with, I do think that there's an opportunity to, I guess I'm wondering if like that's linked, right? Like if you have a feeling about like whether or not you exercise, right? If you feel guilty, if you feel shame, if you like miss a workout, if it's stressful, if it's like anxiety inducing to do the exercise, right? Like all these feelings that a lot of people deal with, and I've been in this camp. Like, is that like, what role does that play in exercise addiction, right? Like, I feel like I'm like remembering like the feelings that I had. I'm like, oh yeah, that was definitely the same thing, right? Like when I would like, and then like that, if you missed it, you would like make up for the missed workout by like flogging yourself, right? Like work out till you puke kind of thing. Not kind of thing. I did that. Where I'd be like, oh, like I missed yesterday. I got to double down, which of course, like anybody, that's not how your body works. We know that. Like,
and we don't coach that way.
We don't coach that way.
I'm never like, oh, you missed the workout, you're doing 2 tomorrow.
No, never.
Funny, right?
Oh, no.
But I'll mentally be like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
I didn't run today. I got double tomorrow now.
No, that's a self-imposed. I've never told anybody, even when I felt that way myself about my own training. Like I never passed that along. Because it's dumb. It's not a good idea, right? Like it doesn't make sense. But so I don't know. Is that like, I don't know. Is that part of it? And I feel like it's like part and parcel to like, if you feel that way, I guess what I'm aiming for is like that there's an opportunity to maybe check your relationship with exercise if you feel like shame or guilt or anxiety, or like if there's this constant like scrambling to get your workouts in. And, and I know it's hard. Like everybody's got a schedule and you kind of got to hustle to get your workouts in. Like I'm also not advocating just like throw your hands up and be like, oh, I had to work a little harder to like get my workout in today. Like I guess I won't do it. But I think anybody that's like been in that place, like, you know what that feels like. It's anxiety.
Well, what if I push back on you two a little bit with that? Because like business, you can get addicted to as well, right?
Totally.
And both of you work a lot, right? And
why are you looking at me?
because I mean, I work. He just said, right?
I
He
work
takes
all the
Sundays
time.
off, and then even on Sunday, it's like, oh, I have to go do something, right? So it is, I'm not even exactly sure where I'm going with this. I'm just pushing your buttons a little bit because, like, I do a business too, right? If I'm not exercising, then it gets channeled into business, and then it goes into that kind of like, okay, we're just going to find addiction somewhere else, right? And I think a lot of that just boils down to, like, for myself, is like validation stuff, right? It's like I need to feel validated, and I need to feel it all the time, which maybe I just want that, right? And then it's like, Rich Roll does, he has a podcast with someone, I forget their name, on addiction. And like everything stems back to childhood, essentially. Every addiction that you develop is because of like childhood. And for some reason, it shaped you to think a certain way about yourself, right? So like, do you two feel that like guilt when you're not working, for example? Like, do you feel what you're describing for exercise when you're not working?
I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's like, I'm advocating. I think that's where you have to check yourself. Like, is it coming from a place of value? Am I working because I am in a good space and I'm feeling productive and I want to spend my time there? Or am I working because I'm guilty that I'm not working? Right. Or like if I made another decision, would I feel into the same thing with exercise? Like, am I exercising because I want to and it's adding value? And maybe I'm squeezing it in because I had a busy day. And like, is that coming from a good place, or am I exercising because if I don't, I'm gonna feel bad about myself. I'm gonna feel like I should have made that decision, or I should have. And I think that's a really important like caveat, like just to recognize and like, that feeling. I think there's a little bit of that. I don't know. Maybe there's part of that that's positive in the sense of like, you need a little bit of push sometimes. Like maybe that like, because otherwise it wouldn't work, right?
Right.
I love to work, but also like just sit, hang out with my dog all day. So there's a bit of that like push where you're like, I need some of that. I don't want to call it guilt because I don't think that's a productive emotion in this particular setting.
Well, and could you go hang out with your dog all day? Could you actually, if you had a week, like, could you actually do that for a whole week?
That's
what I'm saying?
Like, that would be a big challenge for me. I don't know. I'm going to say probably not. I don't know, but my gut is to say no.
Right.
No, again,
or can you not be busy? Like, it boils down to like even that, right? Like,
totally. Yeah. That's a like a systemic societal thing. Like, we are certainly addicted to being busy. Right. I'm in that camp. I really try to like set myself boundaries to fight that. Like, for me, that's like living in Montana. Like, I just go out of service. I just put physical boundaries where I'm like, well, it doesn't matter how I feel. Like, I have to be present in another way because nothing works. Right. So like after you guys leave, like Kailee and I are going to drive north and just go camp for the night because I haven't not worked in, I'm not sure how long. And so I'm like, physical boundaries, like, let's, and again, like I can recognize that. I'm not saying that, the days en route to this were, that I'm sure there was plenty of days where that came from like a negative place. But I think it's just important to like recognize. We're talking about like just like there's a bit of self-recognition that I think it's an opportunity to just check where that comes from and like try to make it as productive as possible. We all have demons and things that we fight and addictive, you know, I've been at camp in different ways, but it has been helpful for me to just, if I feel, just to be like, oh, interesting. Like I'm feeling a fair amount of anxiety about getting this workout in today because of X, Y, and Z scenario. And I set some like secret goals for myself about, you know, I'm going to like PR my deadlift, or I want to run fast today, or I want to run. And I know that if I don't do that, like I'm going to feel shitty about myself. Like, where's that coming from? Can I sidestep that a little bit or just redirect that to be positive and just show up and be present? And if today I don't run fast or I don't feel good or my legs feel tired and I'm, you know, have to decrease weight or like, it's still the sum total of the effort is still worth it. I think it's like very much the same thing on the work front, like as entrepreneurs, right? Like you feel like you know, like, well, I actually have I'm gonna throw a brand under the bus that I actually really like. But the brand 10,000, right? Their tagline is better than yesterday. Like you can't fucking be better than yesterday every day, right? Like and so like, but as like that made me think of that because as entrepreneurs, you think like today has to be like I have to move more forward than yesterday, or it doesn't matter, right? And like there's this, you know, the road to success is full of like massive dips and lows, and there's actually very few high points, right? Like the wins are few and far between. That's okay. That doesn't like it doesn't diminish the effort. But like if you look like upon reflection, you're like, yeah, it just took a lot of shit to get to the high point, and that was a blip, and that was good. And we talked about this last night, and then you're like, well, let me move now. Like there's growth, and so you set yourself back immediately, and you're like, now I'm going to try to learn something new, or put myself in another hard position, and then you like fall back below that. So, yeah, I don't know. I just think, yeah, the mindset piece. I mean, you're much savvier on the mindset side of things than I'm a train wreck. You should be the one talking.
I was gonna say last night we were talking to like about like you were saying like I work out like for like mental health, like for like to improve mental health, and like that's me. I'm like, oh, if I don't work out, then I'm like more anxious and I'm like not as like present and stuff. And it's like, okay, but is that like as a result of the workout, or is that like, you know, the movement aspect of it, or is it because if I don't work out, then that's going back to like the guilt, and then I'm feeling anxious because I didn't do that,
right?
And it's like,
so yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, did you like satisfy, like scratch the itch of the guilt, or did like the chemical response from the workout make you feel better? Yeah.
I think there's both in there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But
well, and again, I just think it, for better or worse, and there's a lot of endurance athletes like this, I would say like 90%. If I didn't have endurance sports, I would for sure either be like nicotine, for example, is probably my biggest crux. Like pretty much most of the males in my family either smoke cigs or cigars. And I don't know if that's genetic. I don't know. But nicotine specifically, like I could chain smoke or like buy a vape thing or whatever, right? And again, like that's a negative, right? That's bad for your health. And it's okay to be like, no, I'm going to cut that out cold turkey, right? But then for me, exercise, like I need it in the morning at least to like kickstart my day and make sure that like I'm mentally in the state I want to be in. And it's like, I'm willing to personally make that sacrifice if that means I'm not drinking heavily or smoking or doing other negative things to myself, you know? And then it's like we opened this can of worms of like a bunch of different things in like the nutrition world and like the exercise and like the balance and whatnot. And it's like, that just might not work for some, you know, like you saw it on this trip. It's like, if I don't get a run in, like I'm a different person. And I used to think like, oh, that's a problem. But now I'm like, I don't know if that's actually a problem, because I think that for some people that they need it, and that's okay. I think not recognizing that is a problem. If you're someone running 10 to 15 miles a day right? And your social life is horrid, and yeah, your relationship with food is horrid, and like, yeah, then that's not better than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, for sure. And I think that, yeah, we need to maybe combat that a little bit, but like recognizing it and being like, okay, this has become the addiction. All right, that's okay. Now what do we do? Right? How do we move from here? If I need this in the mornings, that's okay. But like also I need Kailee too, right? I don't want her to end up resenting me or hating me, and then it's like, let's get that in. Can we do something together? Does the movement look different? Can we like hike or walk or, so that's
you
where,
do completely change.
Right. That's where
after.
our opinion, and I know a lot of people that are like that. I know a lot of people that are like that. And that, I think that can be something you're just born with too. And again, it might be trauma. I don't know. But I think like my brothers and I are all like that for the most part. Like we all have crazy addictive personalities, and we all need to do something, or we're smoking. I'm not saying that to be funny. Like I truly, I've had that issue numerous times.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's for like the whole balance thing. I don't know if I totally agree with that, or can you find that imbalance?
Yeah. I will say, like, I'm not. This would certainly probably be it. Well, we can go down this road. It's fine. Like, I hate the word balance. Like, I think it's bullshit. I think, like, because I'll give a little context. Like, I think to do something, like to care about something and to do something well, like, isn't an inherently like imbalanced endeavor. Right. Like, I actually, like, in the pursuit of things that I really care about, I'm not looking for balance. Right. Like, I don't want my pursuit of like my health and my work to be balanced with other things that I don't care as much about. Right. Like, i.e., whatever. Like I just want the pie chart to be really small, and it's going to be like, and I think, and that balance like swings in different directions, or that like pie chart. But like, I just think the language specifically is what I have a problem with, because it puts people in a reactive position, feeling like they're always fucking it up, right? They're like, oh, I'm not balanced. Like, stop chasing balance. Just focus on the things that you care about. I call them non-negotiables. Like, just put all your eggs in that basket and do that really well. And like, if you spend time in service of the things you care most about, who cares if your life is balanced, right? Like, just do those things. Like, I spend all of my time doing like 3 things. People are like, oh, like, because I don't give a shit about those things, right? And like, I'll sub them in but I'm pumped, like, I'm happy, right? Like, I don't need, and it's different for everybody, right? Like, know yourself. But I think, yeah, like, balance is like, to what end, right? Like, I don't want to be balanced. Like, I want to go really deep on just a couple of things, and those are like, it's not all work. Like, my relationship with my wife. My health, like how I allocate that time and how I fight for that space. My work, for sure. Like, a couple of key relationships from like a friendship perspective. Like, and then I really like to eat like good food. Like, I like to cook good meals. And I'm going to go really hard on that too, because it's something that's meaningful to me. Like, I think that's worthwhile. But then everything else can go to hell. Like, I'm not super interested. Travel, like, there's some like pieces like that for me is like part of the relationship component, like how that's like that cup is filled.
Well, but that's also balance for you, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Also in a sense, what do you think about all of that?
Well, from a Chinese medicine perspective, you have your yin and your yang, right? So the yin is like the cooler, more nourishing, feminine side of things. It's more like winter time. And then the yang is summer. So like right now we have the fiery energy. And what I was saying before was like, there's seasons for everything. Like, in Chinese medicine, we are living in accordance with the seasons. And so like right now being a more yang time, like I do talk about like more yin things to balance it out, and like making sure you're drinking enough and like having your watermelon, like to cool things off and not have so much of this energy. So like, I do think like in our practice, at least, we're trying to like come to this balance of yin and yang, knowing that you're never going to be fully in balance, but there's always going to be equal parts of both. So like, you're never going to be off balance in that way. Like sometimes you're going to have more yang. Sometimes the yin is going to be more. And again, I think it is like person to person. Like you're like we've been saying, like it's very individualized. And yes, finding that balance like for you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Balance for you versus like balance of like, I think people take that literally, right? Like they're like, oh, I want it to all be
equal slices.
Yeah. Like I'm going to work. It's the same as family. Gets the same. I'm like, well, that's just not even feasible. Right. Like factually, we just spend most of our lives working. So let's just put that, like that's 80% of your life, give or take based on your schedule. For me, it's 98%. And yeah, so, but that's a great point. I've wondered, I try to cool down. I mean, like to use that language, like I really struggle, to have that, like that mellow side, even when it feels, and that's where like, I will admit, like I do feel guilt around that. Like even when my body's like, oh, like you should rest and you should like in the wintertime and it's dark. We get like 3 hours of sunlight here. And I'm like, clearly this is the time to like just hang, and I'm just like just plow. And I'm like, and I know I can feel it. I'm just like, you should just hang out, like take a beat, man. Like take a lazy Saturday. And that's very much like, it's interesting to think about because I don't, know a lot about that. I'm like, oh, it's very much that like fiery energy that I try to keep year round, 24/7. But
and that's a cultural thing too, because it used to be in the wintertime, the sun would go down and then you'd be living by candlelight and then it would get darker. So it was just like naturally, like now it's like calm down and like go to bed. And now we can be constantly connected, like to the internet, social media. We can have our lights on. We can be warm all the time. We can cook whenever we want.
Yeah.
So we're changing the trajectory.
I read this really interesting study. I don't remember. Like I'm not going to quote it specifically because I don't remember. But it's like they track like anxiety and depression in relation to just interior lighting. Right. And like as the world got more lit and access to lighting became, like anxiety and depression just ramped up like exponentially with that, because now you can just be on all the time. Like you used to just literally have to like power down because you were out of daylight and you were out of access and your fire burnt out and there was shit outside that was going to eat you. And like not even like caveman, like, just a hand, 100 years ago. Or even like, my granddad, like, depression era, like rural people, like my granddad growing up, he was just like, that was it. Like we didn't have lights and the owl house was out there and it was cold. He's like, so you tried to get all of it done, like, and just be inside because you didn't want to have to go back outside because it just was a pain in the ass to get out there. And so just everything got powered, and they were farmers. Like they worked long days and then they were done.
And they were tired and they went to bed.
Yeah. Also the lack of physical exertion, right? Like you don't have the like true like exhaustion. Not, of course, like we live longer now and this, that, and the other. But yeah, like we also just you get in your car and you drive to work and you sit under lights that tell you you're awake all the time. Doesn't matter what the daylight is outside. And you get back in your car and you come home and you like get on a screen that tells you it tells your brain you're awake. And they're like, people are like, I wonder why I'm tired and like feel anxious all the time. Right. I'm like, yeah, you gotta. That is a rule. I do try to like really limit my exposure. Like again, I set physical boundaries. I'm like, I typically like I keep everything in my office, and at 7:00 I close my door. I leave my phone in there. I don't go to bed with my phone. Don't use my phone as an alarm clock. I actually don't typically use an alarm clock. Just wake up at like 5-ish. That seems to be sufficient unless I like need to catch an airplane, need to get up earlier or something.
My ideal patient.
Yeah.
I'd like to get to that.
I feel like that's because otherwise, again, like I would for me
wake up at 1 a.m. and answer emails.
I would. I've done that a lot. So I was like, you know what? Like this isn't productive. So I gotta leave this in another room. And it's crazy. Like even last night, I was like, I'm gonna set an alarm because I've like been trying to get more sleep. I'm like, I've been like tired, and I call at 7, So like I'm gonna set an alarm for 6 just in case. I woke up before my alarm, but I had my phone on my nightstand last night, and like I didn't even have a second to think about it, and I was scrolling before I went to bed. And if the phone was sitting on top of a book that I'm reading that I really want to read, and I was like, Jesus Christ, like they really are like, it's just built like, it fucks with your brain. I was like literally caught myself like after a couple of minutes, I was like, I didn't even know how I got here. Like what happened? And I like put it away and read like an actual book. Which is another thing I've tried. That just works for me. Like I don't like to read on like a tablet or something. So I'm on screens all day. But I was like, this is brutal. Like they got me, and it didn't even like. I never have my phone in our room, and the one last night, I was like, son of a bitch, they got me. They pulled me in. I was like, damn you, Instagram.
Yep.
Like dog videos, I was like, this is not it. Like yes, they're cute. This is hilarious. I showed Kailee one. It was awesome. And then I put my phone away.
Or we'll like be scrolling Instagram, sending each other reels.
Yeah, like side by side.
Yeah, DMing each other. I'm like, we're in the same room right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Kailee will do that to me sometimes. And like when she does that, I'm like, we're going outside. This is dumb. I'm not doing this. I was like, I won't be a party to this. I don't want to get swept in. Yeah.
Like you're saying with like creating, like needing to create physical boundaries. Like there were a couple of times on this trip when we were like camping, where like on the peninsula, you didn't have service.
Just left my phone in the car.
So
Didn't touch it. So, like for 2 days, it was great.
And Glacier, I didn't have any service. And I feel like having those times to like then think about more things and expand your mind, so you're not just constantly filling it with stuff that's already like content that's already there.
Well, that goes back to like learning, like trying to be more like, more intentional about learning yourself. Like if you could just give it not to take in inputs, right? Like that's just what we fill our time with now. It's like there's more somebody else like talking at me about a thing that I should, I'm gonna use quotes, should be doing. And then you feel, gosh, I'm not doing enough. I can't do it. Like if you just don't do that for a second, and then just like, go for a run and just think about how that feels. And when you finish that run, be like, wonder what kind of food would taste good. Oh, Whole Foods that are like just gonna be here. Like, I always say like, if you can't shoot it or like pick it out of the ground, like it's probably like, let's move on.
Because the amount of information is so overwhelming that's out there. And like with my patients, I typically try to send at least like 1 to 3 like takeaways after their appointment. And if that's starting your day with a glass of lemon water versus like a cup of coffee or like an energy drink, like that's something that they can like do. Because I feel like a lot of people will see all of that and then look get overwhelmed and be like, I can't do any of it. So therefore I'm just going to stay like on this path that I'm already on. Right. And I think like that's the benefit for all of us is we can like kind of like take all of these other pieces for people and then like be people's like coach and like give them these like things that hopefully will be like individualized for each person.
Yeah. I say like, cause people, and I'm not trying to shit on people, like people want to be their best selves. Like I truly believe that, but en route to trying to do that, you're taking in all this information, like, okay, what's the thing? What's the supplement? What's the shortcut? What's the, and I'm like, until you you need to try like hydration, sleep, and regular exercise consistently. Do those really well as you can in your capacity. And then if that hasn't checked all your boxes, then let's explore some other routes. But like, they don't, like let's just condense it down. Just try to drink enough water, right? Yeah. And then maybe with some electrolytes. And then, eat good food, enough of it, not too much. And then exercise. Move consistently every day, unless you are tired and are sick and need to rest. Like it doesn't have to be overly complex, at least at like the foundational pieces of that, right? And we like look like, oh, I wonder if it's I'm not getting enough X, Y. I'm like, you're probably just not getting enough sleep and water, right? Like, let's start there. And then if you check that box,
then let's add on to it with
supplemental, care. Like, I mean, like your work, like Absolutely. Like it takes a village, right? Like you need people, you need PT or chiro or acupuncture. Like, don't work. You can be proactive in feeling better, but let's check the bare minimum boxes first. You're like, I don't know. Are there more? Am I missing? Is there more than three?
You've covered. Yeah. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
The idea of health is very simple, right? It's just very hard to execute.
Yeah.
I'm also very big on your environment that you surround yourself with too. Like if you're with
Yeah, I mean, if people around you aren't drinking water, like,
Sure.
you're probably not drinking very much water either.
like
Right. That's
I
the
believe
other
you're
hard thing too.
a product of your surroundings. But I also believe if you're starting to like drink more water, exercise more, eat better, naturally your community is going to change around you. So
Yeah.
there's that too.
That's really interesting to like the way that works, right? I think, because I've long said that, especially like from the athlete perspective, this certainly applies to like business and entrepreneurship as well. As when you set out on a goal, like it's not just your goal now, right? Like it's the people around you. You need your people on board. Specifically, like if you have a partner that you're spending time with or sharing your life with, like now it's got to be like that person's goal in some way because it's going to impact it. You need that person to be on board, and you need right, like whatever. And it's interesting, like as you progress, like through that goal or into that season of life, and you get like the people around you shift, right? Like I don't know, it'd be interesting to like hear if this happens to you guys or has happened, but inevitably, like get focused on a thing, like the friends that like were raging till 3 a.m. and feeling like shit Saturday and Sunday morning, and I was getting up and going. Like I don't talk to those people anymore. That was a long time ago. Like so you kind of shed those people and you align with people that are like making different decisions. And then with business, you're like people that were playing small and like not. You just wanted to like and I'm not. Everybody's got their own path with like work, and that's totally fine. But like didn't have much to talk about with those people. So like you end up realigning with finding new people, and I think that's a huge part of it, right? I think we convince ourselves oftentimes that those endeavors are like a solo endeavor and that they happen in a vacuum. And I think we discount how much support is required and like how much buy-in from our like community, like immediate family for sure. If you have people in your house, those people got to be bought in 100%, and need to support you in a very meaningful way. And because you have to figure out, like you were talking about that earlier, it's like, what is it, what's your time with Kailee look like versus your time on the weekends? And how do you like, and I've had that conversation, like Kailee and I have had to figure that out of like, there was a time and I just like left, went and exercised and then came back and like fell asleep. And because I'd go like when I was racing bikes, go ride bikes for like 10 hours, come back, I was whooped, and then I'd like do the same thing Sunday morning, and then I'd wake up and go to work on Monday. And I was like, well, that doesn't feel very. I did that for a long time. I was like, this isn't very fun. So you need that buy-in. I don't know what's you guys' experience been with. Has that shifted for you, or you guys found are the same people still with you? Always been the same person.
We've had a lot of these conversations too lately.
That's been the hardest thing.
Oh yeah,
but yeah, I'd say in my life for sure. That if I write a memoir someday, it will probably be around that.
Is it going to be called Progress Requires Pruning?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's been the biggest thing working with you and Christine. Honestly, that like it doesn't end.
No,
and it's like you have to prune everything essentially at some point. And and I don't know, it's been such a struggle because at the same time, it's like, well. You talk about addiction again, right? So it's like I could grind and grind and grind and grind and grind, right? And then you get here and no one's around you, right? Mm-hmm. So having the awareness, I saw that in like mentors, podcasters, whatever. At least in my opinion, I saw that type of stuff, right? So then like learning from your mentors and different people you look up to that are older than you doing what you want to do, right? It's like, you hear them talk about this. So it's like now in my mid-20s, that's where I'm at right now. It's just like, I'm already thinking kind of like, okay, I want to prune, right? Which is hard in itself. But at the same time, what do I not want to prune? Like, can you prune parts of the onion, but then keep, and I think you can, right? But it's hard. And I think that's been that's why,
that's why it's pruning and not like, for any use that for specific analogy, like to its end point. It's like pruning and not cutting down the tree.
Right.
Like you prune, but the tree's still there. And then I think that the way that I think about it is that also like the skill set, and this is a muscle to be developed, and that ties back to self-awareness because you have to know who you are so that you understand like some of those people will actually come up with you.
Right.
But that's a really hard thing to sort out in the moment because you can also fall victim to like dragging those people with you versus like supporting them en route to who you want to be, right? Like they can come with you or like they're hanging onto your shirt and you're dragging, right? And like my mantra,
they're pulling you back.
Right.
Totally. Yeah. Like with that metaphor, like you're not going to go as fast if you're dragging that person too. It doesn't have to be a person. Like it could be, like an opportunity, like an involvement. It could be like, I'm involved in this portion of a business or thing. And like, I need to prune that. And if I like am holding onto that thing too tightly or not able to see it clearly, like it's holding me back. Like I'm trying to drag that thing to a place that it's not supposed to be. And I always say like, you can't drag people towards their full potential, right? Like they have to walk there of their own volition.
Right.
And that's, depending on the personality, and certainly I think some people are more prone to this than others. And depending on kind of the role that relationship, if we're talking about people, and depending on like the emotional attachment you have to a thing, right? Like I've done this with like business ventures where I just like poured my heart into it and I should have just cut it loose. Like it wasn't working. But I was just like, I bet like if I just, years pass, like, and you're like, fuck, okay, it'll be all right. This is done. But I was so emotionally invested. And I'm not saying you should remove emotion from it, but that's a hard muscle to develop, to know how to navigate that in real time. Like how much do I pour in versus not, versus when it's time to cut and run versus, there's a lot of these moving parts. And I don't know. Some of it maybe is just like lived experience, I feel like, I'm not saying I'm nail it. I feel like I am a little better at it now because I've just had to do it a lot. And so I can get to that point a little bit faster and be more confident in it. But it's still a hard thing to sort out.
And it's lonely too. Like 4 years, we've talked about this so many times, 4 years ago, and I am very comfortable saying this type of stuff because like we're talking about like the people that I would be referencing here, like aren't listening to this, Yeah. So, which is ironic and funny, right? Yeah, and it's like a good like analogy of what you were just saying, right? But 4 years ago, the people I was associating with, I don't talk to like any of them. Mm-hmm. There's a few, like I have a few college friends still that I talk to and associate with for sure. There are like a few lifelong friends like that, but it's kind of like you're saying, it's like those friends stick with you no matter what. And on the one hand, it's like, okay, cool, because now I have a different community. Like I would have never probably met you two, right? Had I not, had the courage to move on from things, right? And on the one hand, it's like, oh, that's fucking sick. But on the other hand, there's lonely stages too of that, right? And I think that's entrepreneurship in a nutshell. I forget. I think his name's Taylor Welch. He talks about this. But like, no, it's not him. Doesn't matter. But like, you go through. It's Hermosi. That's who it is. You go through like that lonely period of entrepreneurship where like you've kind of started outgrowing old circles, right? But you haven't entered the new circles yet, right? So you're just like in this in between, and it's just like, fuck, this is lonely, right? And then it's like, oh, maybe I will go back a little bit, And then
he talks about too. He says people don't root for people that need it.
Right? Yes, that's
so you only hear the cheers when you've already made it,
right?
He's like, when I fucking needed it and I was lonely and didn't have a, like you weren't there, no one was cheering for you.
Right.
Right. Like you only get the praise when you've been recognized for the thing that you had to fight to accomplish.
Right.
And like that always really resonates. I'm like, yeah, like to your point, like it's what we think. I was like, yeah, it is lonely. And I think too, like, I mean, I don't want to sound like a bummer, and like you guys might have different opinions, but I just think like the circle gets smaller as you progress.
Right.
I think, in my experience, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think those specific to people, like those relationships get more fruitful and more meaningful versus like, like I think that's some of that's part of getting older too. Just like when you're young, you just attract people, right? You're like, big group, I got fucking 25 people friend group, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And as you get older, you're like, people fall away, and then you build like stronger, more meaningful connections. And then specifically with business, like there's just a lot of people that aren't going to support your endeavors. You're going to get a lot of pushback, and you're going to get a lot of people that are going to tell you that like you're not spending your time right, or you shouldn't work as hard, or why are you doing that, or what do you just settle in, just be. And if that's not the person you want to be, like you're going to have to leave those people behind.
Right.
And that's a really hard thing to do. Like I've had to do that pretty recently. I've just been like, this isn't like, I don't want to be around this person. I don't need someone telling me that the way that I'm spending my time, which I know is in alignment with my values and my vision, is not good, right? Like is the wrong use of time. I'm like, well, like I got a decision to make. Like I can either be around that energy, or I can make like a purposeful, conscious decision to like shift to someone who, but I haven't found that person yet, right? Like this is a relatively new, like the last. So I'm like, now you just, to your point, like in no man's land, right? You're like, well, who's the person that sees it and is like dreaming bigger than I am, and is like, not only is that appropriate, like you're thinking small, right? Like you could be doing this, right? Like that's the people you want to find. But to your point, like Hermosi, like they're not, where are they at, right? Like when you leave them behind, you're not you haven't talked to the people yet that are those people, the one or two people that that's a tough thing to.
Yeah. Well, it's good to hear it never ends. I think I'm going through that a little bit too right now, obviously, with a lot of the stuff we've been talking about.
I think the thing that makes it better, that makes it less brutal, is just to really lean in, like double down on your confidence in who you are and like your direction, right? And be like, no, like this is it. Like I'm not wrong. I know that like this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Well, and something that we talk a lot about is like help the people that want to be helped, like is in with like our patients and clients. And it's like talking about like relationships and stuff. Like I kind of feel like that's the same thing. And like talking about like getting dragged back and stuff. I'm very big, like if you want to like come with, like please, like come to our group runs, come do this. Like I'm happy to like share everything that I know with you. Like if you're questioning and like want to like bring me down, then sorry, like I'm gonna keep moving on. And I think it's just constantly finding those people who are gonna keep allowing you to up level. It's like, okay, I was here with these friendships at this point, and now I learned this or had this experience, and now I'm here. And just like I feel like that's like the pruning part of it too. It's just like constantly up leveling. And then another thing that I think about a lot is like the people that you're spending time with, like how do you feel when you leave? And like if you feel like a worse version of yourself,
so that's great.
Chances are they might not be your people.
That's a good it's a good indicator of like when it's time to prune, to come back to that analogy. I think I don't know, have you had an experience? I know for me, I've not listened to that, for too long, right? Or you're like leaving it, does it feel like these? I don't know.
It's like, but I should, because I've been my friend for so long. They know me so well, but I feel not even like shit, but I just like, it didn't fill my cup, and I could have been doing other things at that time.
Right.
Or, and then you go on like you spend a day with someone else, and they're like, oh, they in a day asked me questions and learned more about me, and vice versa. Like they know more about me right now than anyone else, And then it's, I'm going to go hang out with them,
I think that's a great indicator, is like someone who asks questions and listens, right? Like, is
Right.
it one-sided? I mean, if we're talking about relationships, like that's become a bigger like leading indicator for me. It's like if I'm talking to someone, I'm like, you haven't, and like that's not from a place of like wanting. That's not from a place of ego. That's from a place of like mutual respect, right?
Right.
Like, and you know, if you're gonna like have a relationship with someone that is mutually supported, like I think it's important to like be heard, like to have a space in that relationship. And if you're just like, oh, you just like talked at me for a while and then walked away, like once you got what you needed, right? And I think that's another part of that like growth process is to, yeah, like are there people that are, I mean, you said it, like, are they kind of filling your cup? Or are they just like draining it and you're left like high and dry? And you're just like,
I need a break from that.
yeah. I don't know. I wonder. I think it never ends. You know, which again, like I think that's a good. I don't know. Like with not saying not self-aware, but as you like continue to build that, I think that's also like if I'm in a period of pruning, that also lets me know that I'm in a period of growth, which is exciting, right? Because the only reason that would happen is if the people that took me to where I am now aren't the people that are taking me to where I want to go, right? And so that I'm en route to where I'm trying to go, which means that those people that I need to prune are no longer in alignment.
Right.
So you're like, yeah, this sucks. It also must mean I'm moving forward, right? Even if it doesn't, there's no like maybe clear signs of it, or maybe some big thing hasn't happened. Like it has to be. Otherwise, those people would be fine. Those relationships would support who you are and what you want. And if they're not, then you're at least like you're certainly thinking differently, and you're probably moving in a different way that like has put strain on that relationship, right? And that's why it doesn't work, is because so often, like specifically when we're talking about like high achieving, is that people don't want. I mean, this is an awful thing to say. I feel bad when I say this, but I do like I know that it is inherently like truth. Is that like people don't want you to succeed because it highlights their inability to accomplish their goals, right? Like they're like they know they're like, oh, I could do it, but I'm not. And then if you do it, whatever version of that is yours, it's easier. They want to drag you back because it makes them feel better.
You never get judged by people that.
No.
You know,
yeah. That's our most quote too.
Right. I love that. It's so true.
Yeah.
Never once.
Yeah. No one's ever shit on you who's like doing more than you're doing. Right. The only people that are shitting on you are the people that are trying to drag you back. Yeah.
And so I find that with like, I feel like it goes both ways too, with like people that, you know, as Kailee and I have now gone from just being the mentees, right? Like I feel like we've definitely grown into mentor roles of our own too for certain people. And I've even noticed that for myself for certain things where I'm just like, no, I just want to fucking win. Like,
yeah,
you know, and there's a fun game to that as well.
Totally.
You know, it's like, let's just all win. Like I'm big on when I see people that have similar mindsets to me, it's like, I don't really care if we're like necessarily working together, but you succeeding, I believe will help me succeed in some way because you have a similar mindset.
Yeah.
And it's like the rising tide lifts all boats, right? I'm just so fucking big on that. And, you know, we've had so many conversations about scarcity mindset and whatnot. And like, I just wish more people understood that like, we can all win. Like, I'm so big on it.
It is not a zero-sum game, you know, and like we've talked about that a lot in the coaching space. Is it like if you're successful, it somehow like pulls from my ability to be successful, right? Proverbially, like I don't feel that way, but and that's just not the case, right? Like I mean, I couldn't agree more. Like, and that, I mean, that's what TEC exists for. Like that's largely like my mission and how I show up in the space is like just be like if you're successful, like it makes everyone better, right? Like what if we can all work to just elevate this space, that's a win, right? It makes if you're doing great work, like I know for a fact that then I show up and talk to someone and like that is elevated in some meaningful way, like how people see coaches or how people see the subject matter, or how people, and like same with you, like if we're all just like supporting like someone's ability to like be their highest and best, and doing that in a way that's like in alignment with great work, and like a supportive network, like that makes everyone better. I wish that like, yeah, if I do nothing else in the world, like of all the things that I'm involved in, like I truly like the thing I'm most committed to is like changing that narrative in like endurance sports, right? In the coaching space. Like I want everyone to have a fucking kick-ass coaching business. That doesn't make me less successful or you less successful. Like go nuts.
Yeah.
Build it as big as you could possibly build it. If we had, you know, instead of like whatever the stat is, like 30,000 people in the United States like are considered themselves a coach, 93% of those people are doing it part-time. If that was flipped, if 93% of those people were doing it as a career and making $500,000 a year, are you fucking kidding me? Like how much like more impactful and cooler would that experience be for people like us who are like in that space and doing it as a career? And like, no, and people are like, oh no, like I can't, if you get an athlete like that, you just took one from me. I'm like, don't be so small-minded, right? Like look at the bigger picture. Like if we elevate, that creates an environment where like everyone's playing big, like it opens up opportunities. And you're not charging $20 for a training plan, you're charging $2,000 an hour for something that you've dedicated your life to, right? Which is how it should be. And it will be that. Like I will fucking die on this hill. Like I mark my words. But and I'll know from there, like the sky is the limit. But yeah, there's so much opportunity there. And that goes back to like progress requires prayer. You need people. Like that's why, I mean, you know, like you guys are an important part of my community. That's why we're sitting on this couch talking about it. Like I'm not talking about this to people that don't feel this way, right? I'm not going to try to convince somebody who's like, oh, I just want my 10 athletes and I want to, you know, like, no, like let's go nuts, right? Like let's build. Whether it's like a coaching company or your practice, like you need people around you who like see the vision, right? And don't like scoff when you're like, say what I just said, right? Which I've said that before and people are like, oh, that's crazy. I can never do that. I'm like, then you need to move on down the road. Like it will happen and you will be bummed that you played so small and here you are, you know, making $2,000 a month with your 10 clients, like working 100 hours a week, right?
Well, we all attract different people too.
Mm-hmm.
Like
totally,
I attract certain acupuncture patients that like may not fit with somebody else. So there's people that I'm like, maybe you're not the best fit for me, so go see somebody else. And again, that's like elevating the entire profession. And like someone might like be a perfect fit for Jacob, but not for somebody else. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's okay. Because there's, like you were saying, like there's people for everyone. Yeah. And even if that's like coworkers or like business partners, like same thing. Like they might go find like their other group that fits their like desires more. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. Like, I've recommended other coaches to athletes that said they didn't want to work. I've been like, all right, like here's, if you don't want to work with me, that's cool. You should go check out these people, you know? And I feel like it's unfortunate how little that happens. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, if I can't have you, it's like, oh, then I don't want you with us.
Coaches don't spend nearly enough time, like understanding who their ideal client is and doubling down on that. Like just work with your people. To your point, Kailee, like if you know that person, just work on attracting those people and then other people can go elsewhere. You know, like the way that you coach athletes and the people you attract are different than I attract. Fantastic. Just, you know, like you want more of your people and I want more of my people and everyone has a lane. And yeah, like so many coaches spend an inordinate amount of time and energy pouring into an athlete that's not the right fit or a client that's not the right fit if you're a service provider in some other vertical, but from a place of scarcity. Right. If you just send that person on, like I know for a fact I've seen it happen so many times, like in my own coaching practice. Send that person on and like 5 more people, the right people come your way. Yeah. Right. For a second, you might be like, I was, you know, X amount of money. I could have, but if you just be clear on like who you are and who you're talking to and who your audience is and your expertise, blah, blah, blah. Those people are there in droves, more than you could ever work with. You will be maxed out and you could make as much money as you want to make and build all the products you want to make to service those people. But just like, operate from a place of scarcity. And then you end up working with a bunch of shitty people. And they're not shitty people. You guys aren't, you're not simpatico.
Yeah.
I did that for sure. When I first started, I was like, take them all.
Yeah, claim everyone.
Yeah, and I was like,
these are my
I was
people.
like, oh, this athlete roster sucks. I was like, but like, they didn't suck. Of course they didn't suck. Like, it was not the right fit. My style, the way I think about all the stuff we're talking about, the way I think about the world, and that's evolved from when I was a coach in my early 20s.
Well, you kind of have to do that first too, right? Like, as you're figuring out who you are as a coach and whatnot, and there's an element to like, at first you got to work with whoever wants to work with you, for sure. But then there gets to be a point where it's like a diminishing return. Right?
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, I think if you can have some, I think it's a balance. If you can have some guidelines of like who works best, and then also, like you're trying to build your coaching business, so don't stay poor.
I think during that time, you're like finding who your ideal client is too.
Like
when I first started out, I was like,
that's a great
I want to work with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm kind of like, okay, this is more of like who I want. I know you're doing a lot more of that. Like,
I'm still like figuring out who my ideal client is.
Yeah.
That's a great point. That's a better way to, I think, I didn't have the words for it, but like there's a discovery phase.
Yes.
Where you're like, okay, I get it now. Like,
So it is okay to be open, I think, at the beginning.
Yeah, that's a great
and not super closed off,
Mhm.
because then that can like silo you, put you into different boxes.
All right.
So
And I think we talked about this on last time I was on too, about how, like when I first started coaching, it's the same thing with like my own athlete journey, right? Like I really wanted to coach like people who wanted to get like BQs, for
Mhm.
example. Like that was, something cool to me. And like I wanted a BQ, right? And like everyone wants to work with like elite athletes, right? And at first that was like something that I never really wanted to work with elite athletes, I guess, but like, you think about it, right? And then you work with a few people and you just realize that's like, oh wait, they're not for me, right? And discovering who like my ideal client is and whatnot, it's like my ideal client are people that have problems that I've had, really, and it's what it boils down to, right? And I've never been an elite athlete. I don't fucking know what that's like. My ideal client is the client who works 40 to 60 hours a week, is a high performing entrepreneur, or like, when I say entrepreneur, I don't mean it just like they're running a business, but they're like high performers in their career, right?
Mhm.
They're like that growth mindset individual that like just wants to learn and do better. And that could be a 6-hour marathoner. It could be a 3-hour marathoner. Like it could be all over the board. It's just, and that took years to figure that out. Right. So.
Yeah, I think you do attract. I've found that too. Like you kind of attract what you, from your own experiences and like what you put out in the world. Like I'm very much the same. I attract people, lo and behold, similar to me, right?
Exactly.
Like super like busy people, and I don't mean that but like they work a lot. They have, just like you're saying, like high profile jobs or high achieving. They tend to be like high achievers or want to be high achievers in like all areas of their life. They're trying to squeeze it in amidst like other responsibility. I'm like, oh, I get that. Great.
I can bread and butter.
I'm like,
I can talk about that.
I can do it every day.
Yeah, let's talk about, I did.
And then we can send them to Kailee when they're burnt out and need to like back off on their bullshit like me.
Right. Yeah. And I think accepting that is a huge part of the journey, Like, again, helping people who want to be helped, right?
Yeah.
The D1 collegiate athlete, I wasn't that. I have no problem with not coaching that athlete. I would send you to someone who was a collegiate D1 athlete.
Right,
that makes sense to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I also struggle, we've talked a lot about this stuff too. I also struggle with like the reverse of that, and like how in like the car industry, like we talked about this last time I was here, right? The best salesman doesn't necessarily make the best like cars manager or whatever, sales manager, And in the coaching industry, a lot of times we look at coaches like, oh, because they were fast or because they ran in high school, college, like they're a good coach, right? And that's something that also like, I struggle with a lot. And, this has taken a lot of growth on both of our ends. We talk about this a lot too. It's like, I'm not going to necessarily change everyone's mind on that. And again, it goes back to the person that realizes that. Every one out of like 10 people will realize that. And then they come and talk to like myself, right? And capitalize on that, right? Like I'm very big on, when someone is like, oh, wait, he actually like worked a similar job to me, right? He wasn't fast in high school or college and he picked up running as a hobby. Maybe he does know how to fit this into a schedule, right? It's just different, right? And so I've struggled with that side of it too. And like, how far do I go for trying to teach the masses that with at the same time also not caring too much so that I can help the people that do realize that, So that's another thing that
I don't know that's we've talked about this. I'm going to try not to get on the soapbox too much, but I think there's a massive opportunity, in terms of like the true value that coaches provide and the importance of that relationship, whether or not a coach can run fast or ride fast or has done all the distances is irrespective of their ability to build strong relationships with an athlete and listen and communicate. I mean, that's what coaches are, right? Like we're professional communicators. And yes, also I have been a high level athlete. That didn't help me communicate. It gave me exposure, right? Like, I think, there's part of that for sure. Like we want to know the dynamics of race days and this and the pressure and the stress and mental stuff, putting ourselves in those situations. But it doesn't matter how fast I was, and it doesn't matter what I'm doing now. People always say, what are you training for? Nothing. Anyway, I'm listening. Yeah. Like it doesn't matter. Maybe if I am or I'm not training for something, or what am I doing, and like, those are all, I just think it's separate, right? Like, and certainly we use our own athleticism to continue to inform our coaching practice. And I think that's been one of the most impactful things for me is like, as I've grown as an athlete and evolved and like from somebody who 100% focused on being really fast to someone who thinks about consistent movement much differently and is still very focused on like my performance and health, but the role of that is very different in my life. Like that has evolved separate to the skills that I have built to be a really good coach. And all of the skills required that have made me be a really good coach have nothing to do with my athletic performance, right? It's my listening skills. It's communication. It's the list goes on. Mm-hmm. And then like Taylor, the athlete, is over here with some experiences that certainly help inform how he communicates and listens. But yeah, no, I think that's one of the biggest opportunities or narrative shifts in the coaching industry is it doesn't fucking matter if you're fast, right? Like, and I want athletes, I don't care if really even if that's where coaches come from. Like if they're like, hey, I was this fast athlete and I was a D1 runner and now I'm passionate about this and I want to build a coaching business. I actually don't fine. What I want to happen is I don't want athletes to lead with that question because it shortchanges the value of the coach and it overshadows the questions they should really be asking. Right. Which is so I want athlete. I want to change the narrative for the client side, which is let's, ask better questions. The fact that they are fast isn't going to make them the right coach for you. Right. And that's kind of if the coach wants to start coaching because they were that athlete and that, which is so many people, right? I don't really have a problem with that. Be a good coach, hone your skills, be good at your craft. Don't stop with I was fast, so now I can coach. That's not enough. But if you continue to hone your craft as a coach, I just want athletes to know there's better questions to ask. And don't pick a coach because they were fast in college, right? Or they just ran a ultra marathon, right?
Right.
I've had athletes when they're I want to work with you because you're a professional mountain biker. I'm like, that's not why we're going to work together. Let's talk about some other stuff.
Right.
Like, let's make sure we're connected in a different way, because that doesn't have anything to do with my ability to coach you.
Right.
Right. Which is like, that's a relationship. The fact that I was fast on a mountain bike is just a fine skill that I had at one point in my life.
Just because you were a 4.0 student does not mean you're going to be a good tutor or teacher.
Totally.
Right.
That's a great example.
Same thing.
Right.
Yeah. I did great in school. I'm a shit tutor.
Yeah.
I don't have patience. I'm not good at it, right? Like, that's a great example. Yeah. Like, I'm not your guy.
Yeah.
And I'm also trying not to like shit on like the D1 athlete either that does it, because there's kick-ass coaches.
Totally.
I refer to them, right? So I'm like, and they have experiences I'm never been, right? And so there's truth to that too.
Yep.
It's just,
Again, there's a place for everyone.
right. And then, exactly.
Yeah.
And then circles.
Which is what some D1 athletes did. They ran in circles on the tracks. They were it's all metaphor.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Is there anything we missed? Topics? Ideas?
I feel like we could talk for
I feel like this was great. We have the Olympic 10K we need to throw on and a workout to hit.
All right, we're going to watch the 10K and we're going to hit a strength workout.
Yeah.
We're going to practice what we preach. We're going to do it from a place of value. It's the workout we want to get in. We don't feel like we have to.
because we all really like each other.
Because we all want to share ideas.
We're going to take out you and your wife to dinner. Sound good?
You guys are much better runners than I am. I'm hoping that I can whoop your ass in a strength training
Yeah,
workout.
for sure.
I'm hoping I can
It won't
get
be hard.
one small glimmer of not feeling like an absolute turd coming
You have
up.
like a 150-pound sandbag out there.
I'm not sure I could lift
gonna be
that
insane.
thing.
It's happening. It's happening. You can just.
I mean, I think that something that I'm huge on is, although I said this to my strength coach once, I was like, I want to be stronger than the runners, but faster than the lifters. And I want to like be able to go into weight rooms and like hold my own, but then like go, if some runners are going and doing some like easy 7:30 minute, like I'm not going to run a 4 minute mile for sure, but like a sub 4, right? But
that's what we're calling hybrid now.
Right. I want to be hybrid.
Yeah.
And I think you don't like that term, right? Is that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't mind. I don't have a problem with it. I think I have heard just some funny, like pushbacks from that are like some folks are like, oh, you mean like, so you run and you strength train and you like do like, isn't that just what we call an athlete?
Right. I just want to be,
Because they're typically you'd have several modalities that you would like use to hone your skills. Strength training would always be a part of that. Not like lifting heavy, like that's a different thing. But so I don't know. I don't have a problem with it.
I think it's just coexisting in both spaces. I think that's why Nick Bear has been so special for so many people, is because he was this buff bodybuilder, strength dude. He's like, I'm going to run a sub 3 hour marathon. He got so much fucking hate. The dude's ran sub 240.
Yeah, he's mad.
He's done bodybuilding. He's doing high. He just does it fucking on. It's just like, I'm just chilling. I'm just like, I'm working out and I'm living. And
I do really think it's cool. Like, I mean, as someone who just really appreciates like the evolution of my personal athleticism, I do like the idea of just being like, because I don't know, like I'm not in that kind of shape, especially running shape or strength side of things compared to someone like Nick, but. I like the idea of just being able to like do like engage. Like somebody's like, hey, let's go do a 50K in the mountain. Like I want to be ready. Right. And somebody's like, let's go do a 500-pound deadlift and like lift heavy at it. I want to be ready. Right. And somebody like, I like the idea of just being capable.
Right.
And kind of being
yoga.
Yeah. No, I go to like yoga every Thursday with Kailee. She's all super bendy. I look like a fucking idiot there, but I'm in it. Like it's fine. Like I'm like a 200-pound dude. Like, in there doing yoga with a bunch of little yoga people. Yeah. And like, great. Like they're all like high five me. Like they think it's funny that I'm in there. And my like big legs don't really bend the way theirs do, but that's fine. Like I'm pumped. It feels fucking great. Right.
We're going to go home and bike 50 miles when we get back to Minnesota. It's like, we want to be able to just well, you said it was going to be 100 now, but I'm saying 50.
100K.
Maybe
just do it.
But to be able to go out and just do that is really cool.
Yeah. I think if generally, if we kind of collectively could, I would advocate for a bit more of that mindset, just like as athletes, right? Like, you have to be, there has to be specificity. If you want to be a runner, you need to run. But also knowing that, like, because I just like I did this. I would say I did this wrong. Certainly when I was like all I did was ride my bike, and I missed out on a lot of things and lost a lot of other types of fitness that I really had to fight to get back in the years that followed, like me racing at a high level. And so I think we could just have more appreciation maybe for like other modalities, and just know that like it all plays a role. Like it all, if you need to run, like run more for sure, but also like ride a bike, strength train in the winter, like lift heavy if that seems cool, or do CrossFit or like whatever. We get really pigeonholed, right? And like sometimes, maybe coaches play into this some, like not us in this room, but I think there's an option because it just keeps things fun too.
Right.
Like, I'm having way more fun with exercise and like now that I have and that I did when I was younger. I just did it. I was just, this is what I do, and I was fine. It produced results. Like for my goals at that time, that was appropriate. So again, depends on everybody's different, but I think that's where hybrid, I think, is getting it right. Right. If it encourages people to like mix it up and have fun and engage in some different things and like try some other modalities, I think that's cool.
Right.
It keeps you doing it for life.
Yeah.
For your longevity.
Is that our mic drop ending moment?
Boom.
Here we go, the mic drop in.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
This was fun.